Good evening, my friends.
I looked at the
possibility
leaderboard
of a
and I'm like,
major
well, I wanna
shakeup
watch
inside
Rory.
the Philadelphia Eagles organization is suddenly becoming one of the biggest stories surrounding this team as training camp gets closer. And what makes everything even more fascinating is that there are multiple situations developing at the exact same time that could completely change the direction of this roster heading into 2026. From undrafted free agents quietly fighting for roster spots, to growing speculation involving A.J. Brown, to the idea that Vic Fangio could be building the best defense of his Eagles tenure, there is a lot happening behind the scenes right now that Eagles fans cannot ignore. One of the most underrated storylines developing right now is the battle involving several undrafted free agents that the Eagles clearly believe have legitimate upside. And when you really study how Philadelphia handled these signings financially, you begin to understand which players this organization truly values. The Eagles do not randomly hand out guaranteed money to undrafted players, unless they believe those guys have a real opportunity to either make the roster or eventually contribute on the practice squad. A player generating quiet attention right now is Kapina Gauchigan out of Ole Miss. The defensive back transferred from Washington State and eventually became part of a college football playoff run. He played in 15 games during the 2025 season, recorded 55 tackles and an interception, and Philadelphia immediately gave him guaranteed money after signing him. That tells you the Eagles front office sees something there. With Vic Fangio always looking for versatile defensive backs who can adapt to multiple coverages, Gauchigan could become one of the surprise names fans start hearing throughout preseason games. Another fascinating name is Joshua Weiroo through the International Pathway Program. Eagles fans immediately noticed the similarities to Jordan Mailata because Weiroo also comes from a rugby background. Philadelphia has become one of the smartest organizations in football when it comes to developing unique athletic prospects, and they clearly believe Weiroo has enough raw talent to invest in early. Edge rusher depth is always important in Fangio's system, especially over a long season, and players like Weiroo could slowly carve out developmental roles if they flash athletic ability during camp. Then there is Daquan Wright, the tight end who surprisingly went undrafted despite impressive production at Ole Miss. The Eagles already drafted Eli Stowers, but Wright is still an extremely interesting player because of his size at 6'4" and 246 pounds. He began his career at Virginia Tech before finishing under Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss, where he produced 39 catches for 635 yards and 5 touchdowns last season. Philadelphia clearly believes there is something to work with here, especially considering the organization gave him guaranteed money immediately. His combination of size and receiving ability could make him one of the more entertaining camp players to watch. Deontay Lawson may actually be the biggest name among the undrafted additions, simply because Eagles fans already know who he is from Alabama. Injuries hurt parts of his college career, but the athleticism and physicality were always obvious. Lawson played in the SEC, came into college with major expectations, and developed into a very strong run defender. The Eagles may initially view him as a special teams contributor, but Philadelphia has always valued linebackers who can develop inside the system over time. If Lawson stays healthy, there is definitely a path for him to earn attention quickly. But while these young players are trying to fight for opportunities, the biggest cloud hanging over this franchise right now continues to be A.J. Brown and the growing trade speculation involving him. And now, another team is suddenly entering the conversation in a serious way: the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars have become extremely aggressive under general manager James Gladstone. Even though he is still early in his tenure, Jacksonville already showed a willingness to take massive swings by trading multiple first-round picks to move up for Travis Hunter. Gladstone comes from the Rams system under Sean McVay and Les Snead, which means he understands the philosophy of being aggressive and chasing star talent instead of simply protecting draft picks. That matters because A.J. Brown is exactly the type of player who can instantly transform an offense. Jacksonville desperately wants to maximize its current competitive window, and pairing Trevor Lawrence with a receiver like A.J. Brown would immediately change the entire ceiling of that offense. The Jaguars may not have ideal cap space right now, but every NFL team knows there are always ways to create flexibility when a superstar becomes available. At the same time, Howie Roseman understands how to play these situations perfectly. Even if the Eagles already have conversations happening with other teams, it benefits Philadelphia tremendously to expand the market for A.J. Brown. The more teams involved, the more leverage Howie gains. And according to league discussions surrounding the situation, the Eagles are in absolutely no rush to force a deal immediately. What becomes truly interesting is the possibility of Jacksonville offering something beyond just draft picks. Brian Thomas Jr. is a name that suddenly changes the entire conversation. In his rookie year, he looked like one of the most explosive young receivers in football after finishing with 87 catches, over 1,300 yards, and 10 touchdowns. His second season statistically declined, but Jacksonville's offensive inconsistency and quarterback instability clearly impacted his production. Still, the talent is undeniable, and if the Eagles ever found themselves in a position where they could receive Brian Thomas Jr., plus major draft compensation for A.J. Brown, that becomes a conversation impossible to ignore. Philadelphia has consistently shown confidence in its locker room culture and player development structure. This is the same organization that trusted its environment enough to maximize players with enormous upside before. If they believe Brian Thomas Jr. can thrive inside this system, that possibility suddenly becomes extremely dangerous for the rest of the NFL. Meanwhile, another storyline quietly building excitement among Eagles fans is the belief that Vic Fangio may be constructing the strongest defense Philadelphia has had under his leadership. When you really examine this roster position by position, there are arguments everywhere that this unit could become even more dangerous. The defensive line remains absolutely loaded. Jalen Carter continues evolving into one of the most dominant interior defenders in football. Jordan Davis still provides elite size inside, and Moro Ojomo is beginning to receive serious praise internally. On the edge, Jonathan Greenard now enters the picture alongside Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt, giving Philadelphia another wave of pass rushing pressure. The linebacker room is also evolving in a fascinating way. Nakobe Dean became a fan favorite, but Jihad Campbell brings a lead athletic upside that could eventually elevate this defense even further. Zach Bond already established himself as one of the best linebackers in football last year, and the Eagles believe Campbell's long-term ceiling could become special under Fangio's system. The secondary may actually be the most exciting area of all. Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean already looked like stars during the Super Bowl run, and now they enter another season with more experience and confidence. Adding a player like Rick Woolen gives Philadelphia even more versatility and athleticism at cornerback, making this group potentially deeper and more dangerous than previous seasons. The only major question mark right now is safety. Reed Blankenship remains important, but Philadelphia still appears likely to explore veteran options at some point. Whether that happens before the season or closer to the trade deadline remains to be seen, but the Eagles clearly understand that position still needs answers. And that is what makes this entire situation so fascinating right now for Eagles fans. This roster is already loaded with talent, yet major changes could still happen. Young undrafted players are trying to shock everyone and steal roster spots. A.J. Brown trade rumors refuse to disappear, and Vic Fangio may be preparing a defense capable of dominating the NFL once again. So now the biggest question becomes this: if the Eagles truly received an offer involving Brian Thomas Jr. and premium draft compensation for A.J. Brown, would you actually make that trade, or would you keep A.J. Brown no matter what? And this is where the entire situation surrounding the Eagles becomes even more complicated, because while fans are debating whether A.J. Brown should stay or go, the organization is simultaneously preparing for another season where expectations are absolutely massive. Philadelphia is no longer being viewed as a team simply trying to compete for the playoffs. This roster is being judged by Super Bowl standards now, and every single move Howie Roseman makes is connected to one goal only: keeping this championship window open for as long as possible. That is exactly why these A.J. Brown rumors continue gaining traction instead of disappearing. When you really look at the Eagles from a front office perspective, you can understand why this conversation is even happening. A.J. Brown is still one of the best wide receivers in football. He is physically dominant, extremely productive, and completely changes how defenses play against Philadelphia. But at the same time, the Eagles have consistently proven they are willing to make difficult decisions earlier than most organizations would. They move aggressively, they think ahead financially, and they constantly try to avoid situations where a player's value starts dropping before they act. That is why teams around the league continue monitoring this closely. Howie Roseman understands that if there is ever a moment to maximize A.J. Brown's trade value, it would likely be now, while he is still viewed as a top-tier receiver in his prime. And the Eagles are one of the few organizations confident enough to even entertain the possibility of replacing star talent because they trust their drafting, coaching, and development systems. But here's the part Eagles fans cannot overlook. If Philadelphia ever moved A.J. Brown, they would need to feel extremely confident about the replacement plan already being in place. That is where someone like Brian Thomas Jr. becomes so intriguing. The Eagles would not simply be trading away a superstar receiver for future picks and hoping things work out years from now. Brian Thomas Jr. is already proven to be capable of producing at a very high level in the NFL. His rookie season showed elite explosiveness, strong route running ability, and the kind of athletic upside that defensive coordinators fear. In many ways, he represents exactly the type of young ascending talent that front offices dream about building around long term. And if Philadelphia believes the environment inside their locker room can elevate him even further, then suddenly this becomes more than just a trade rumor. It becomes a possible roster reset designed to keep the Eagles competitive for years instead of only focusing on the next season. Still, this situation is dangerous. Trading A.J. Brown would immediately place enormous pressure on the offense. Jalen Hurts has developed incredible chemistry with him, and A.J.'s physical presence changes how opposing defenses structure coverage packages. Losing that kind of weapon is never simple, no matter how talented the replacement may be. And Eagles fans know very well how quickly championship windows can close in the NFL when offensive chemistry changes unexpectedly. At the same time, the Eagles seem fully aware that their defense may now be strong enough to carry even more responsibility. Vic Fangio's impact on this team cannot be overstated. Last season, Philadelphia developed into one of the most feared defenses in football by the end of the year, and what they did in the Super Bowl against Patrick Mahomes completely shocked the football world. Sacking Mahomes 6 times without blitzing once was one of the most dominant defensive performances fans have seen in years. That game alone showed exactly how dangerous Fangio's system becomes when the personnel fully understands it. Now imagine this defense entering another season with younger players gaining experience and confidence. Jalen Carter is becoming a nightmare for opposing offensive lines. There are moments where he already looks like the best defensive tackle in football, and the scary part for the rest of the league is that he is still improving. Jordan Davis continues giving the Eagles size and power inside, while Moro Ojomo is emerging as another important piece in the rotation. Fangio wants relentless pressure without relying heavily on blitzing, and Philadelphia may now have the depth to overwhelm teams